560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Of course, the big story is the big trade impasse between China and the United States. Although tariffs are being ratcheted up between the United States and China, we're holding harmless all our other countries to focus everybody's attention on China, as Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, explained yesterday.
This was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. And that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
Right. We needed this to realize, or the world needed this to realize, that the Chinese Communist Party is the bad actor, unless you're similarly inclined ideologically. Bessent also adding that, look, China can go to 84%. Well, we go to 125%, right. And if they go to 125%, we go to 175%, and we can do this all day long.
Do I hear 84%?
Because China needs us more than we need them, which is basically the administration's posture with respect to every country on the planet.
We've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Ian Williams, who is a former foreign correspondent for BBC Channel 4 News and NBC, author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Ian Williams, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.
So you heard from the Treasury Secretary yesterday that Trump has goaded China into a bad position. This escalating tariff situation back and forth between the two countries hurts China a lot more than it hurts the United States. And ultimately, now that we put a pause with our partners, or mainly our trading partners and allies, we'll get everybody together, and then we're going to gang up on China. And how will they like that? That going to work?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a dizzying 2 or 3 days, and I'm amazed by all these analogies of prize fighters in the ring, two racing cars bearing down on each other in a game of chicken. I think China's gambling that America will blink first, because although the Chinese economy is certainly vulnerable in multiple ways, yes, because of its reliance on cheap exports, also because it's in a bit of a bad way at the moment with a property crisis, youth unemployment, an economic model that simply isn't working. But they're gambling that the threshold of pain in China is much higher than it is in the U.S. You know, we've already seen the bond markets having an impact. We've already seen the stock markets falling, people's pension plans. The potential political pressure on Trump is far higher than it is on Xi in China. China's a dictatorship. The people will take more because they haven't got too much choice is part of the thinking there. And he has got quite a substantial toolkit that goes well beyond tariffs.
Well, and the well beyond tariffs, I mean, one of the things that was running concurrent to this the escalating tariffs is the military exercises that the Chinese Communist Party was again doing in the direction of Taiwan. And one of the things that he potentially has at his disposal, if he wanted to really escalate, is to put an embargo on the Taiwanese, right?
Yeah, and you're already seeing rehearsals for that. That's part and parcel of these training exercises, this intimidation that's been going on around Taiwan. And it's an old game plan of the Chinese Communist Party. It is now a very nationalistic party. In fact, you could probably more accurately describe it as a nationalist party, a pretty virulent nationalist party, as opposed to a communist party. And when things get tough at home, Xi turns up the rhetoric. He turns up the xenophobia, the nationalism. And you're seeing this online in China at the moment with calls for boycotts, which was actually answered by overnight by a reduction in the amount of movies that they're going to import into China. And, I think that's a sign that you're going to see a lot more focused boycotts on particular companies and particular industries. But you're right, that is a danger that when Xi comes under pressure, that he does resort to more nationalism, for more banging of the nationalist drum. And of course, that's where the situation around Taiwan becomes very worrying, because it's a distraction, but it's a dangerous distraction. But it's very tempting for a communist leader who's under economic pressure.
Well, what do you think?
In terms of not importing as many American-made movies, I mean, he will be sparing the Chinese people Snow White, so that probably will put him in good stead. But what about what's at the disposal of the United States that would be impactful to China? Things like student visas that are particularly attractive to the elites within the Chinese Communist Party and its ranks.
I think that's important, but I think to some extent the Chinese Communist Party has looked on with increasing suspicion and unease at the export both of students and of entrepreneurs, because you've seen a huge exodus over recent years as Xi has cracked down on entrepreneurs, particularly on the tech sector. They've been fleeing. Singapore's been popular. California's been popular. They want to protect their assets. They want to protect their money. They want to protect their freedom, because a lot of entrepreneurs have simply disappeared or had their companies stripped away from them. So I think that there'll be mixed feelings about this. I think the Chinese businesses and entrepreneurs have suffered greatly in recent years, but I think that Xi, to some extent, is quite suspicious about those who have been looking for a foreign bolt hole. So it kind of cuts both ways, but this is an economy which has a long experience of coercion and bullying. It's been part and parcel of China's rise, of China's economic model over recent years. You fall into line, that's the price for access to China. That's the price for market access, for investment. And most companies have tended to fall into place. Hand over your technology as a price for market access. So China's got a long experience of bullying and coercion as part of its economic policy, and it's in some respects it's a bigger toolkit than the U.S. has, and it goes well beyond tariffs.
Yeah, and they've stolen a lot of intellectual property. But what about the American consumer? I don't think people realize about 50 to 80% of what we buy is from China. So how is it going to affect us?
Well, prices will go up, but also the choice will go down, because you're seeing already ships which have been on the way to the U.S., on their way to the big ports on the West Coast, being turned around and redirected because they don't know what is going to happen. They don't know the prices that will be paid, the wholesale prices, don't forget, because the tariffs go on the wholesale price, which is only about a quarter of what the price will be in the shops. So the increase in the shops will not be that 125% headline figure. But certainly the days of made in China, of cheap Chinese goods, do look like they're over. And there are other substitutes. There are countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, India, which are increasingly filling that gap with consumer goods, and they will be somewhat relieved, of course, that the heavy tariffs that were originally imposed on them have been lifted. But certainly, the days of cheap made in China do really look like they're over.
Well, I mean, that's I guess predicated on the idea that there won't be a deal in the offing. But Stephen Miller, one of Trump's top policy advisors, he had this to say on Fox yesterday about China being forced to the table. I want you to take a listen and get your reaction.
I believe that China will be forced very soon to come to the table for the simple reason that China's economy is completely dependent on its exports to the United States and to the West. China has built its entire industrial strategy since its entrance into the World Trade Organization on being able to sell highly subsidized, currency-manipulated, dumped goods into U.S. markets. It is an industrial strategy from China to product dump strategically to take out American steel, to take out American aluminum, to take out core American defense industries and defense needs so that we're reliant on China. And what's happening here is that China is now discovering for the first time that they have met an American president who is not going to be intimidated, who's not going to be bullied, who's not going to be coerced, who's going to stand up for our essential security needs.
Yeah,
China needs us because of their export dependency on China.
Do you think that's an accurate depiction of the of President Xi's thought on this?
I don't think so. I think he's far more determined to dig his heels in on this. I don't see. I mean, there was some more reasonably conciliatory words coming out of the Chinese Commerce Ministry this morning, which were far less inflammatory than some of the comments we heard yesterday. But I don't get a sense that Xi is going to come running to the table for a deal. I think Beijing has been preparing for this for some time. Yes, they probably didn't expect to see such a high rate of tariffs imposed on them and the pain that's causing, but they've already been trying to spread their investment. They've already been trying to shift their pattern of trade and exports elsewhere. Some of it is barely disguised transshipment through other countries such as Vietnam and Thailand, where they built facilities that do little more than bolt together Chinese goods. But I think that Xi has been anticipating some sort of showdown like this for some time and trying to make the Chinese economy more resilient. Now, I think it's far from resilient and it will suffer, but I don't expect that Xi will fold overnight.
Well, right, not overnight, but I mean, it could reach a point where it's sort of which falls first, or which is inflicting more pain. The internal contradictions of the Chinese Communist Party's reign. I mean, it's the same. It's very Soviet in this sense. It's the internal contradictions is why. The central planning, why China has never realized the strength of its numbers and why its economy is as precarious as you described it. So, will he hold out until those internal contradictions could actually produce sort of another Tiananmen Square event? Or will he try to head that off before it gets that far? And, just like Gorbachev, if that's his approach, he could end up missing the window he had to save his regime, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the threshold for pain is far higher in China because it is a dictatorship, because he doesn't need to be so bothered about public opinion or economic pain. But that's not to say that he can discount either. We saw his hand was forced at the end of the COVID-19 epidemic when they abandoned their zero COVID policy after a whole wave of protests, which had united workers and students, the middle class, against the draconian measures. So certainly he can't get his own way entirely, and the Communist Party will be well aware of simmering discontent. And arguably, the legitimacy of the party, because there aren't any elections, it's sometimes called performance legitimacy, the party's ability to deliver economic stability and economic growth is fundamental to its legitimacy. So, yes, the threshold of pain in China is probably higher because it's not a democracy, but certainly there are undercurrents there of dissatisfaction, which could certainly come back to haunt him.
Ian Williams, former foreign correspondent for BBC Channel 4 News and NBC, author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Ian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A pleasure.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
President Trump has made some pretty amazing claims since he's taken his seat as president. He's delivering on what he promised. On Inauguration Day, Trump's very first declaration was,
"The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish."
Consider this. Since the election, gold has shot up hundreds of dollars per ounce, shattering all-time record highs. Fox Valley Coins does not pretend to know the future, but they do know that if you're buying or selling gold or silver, they are the place to do it. These are some of the top reasons people choose a dealer. You want a national dealer with a local presence you can deal with face-to-face. You want a large selection, the best prices, and great service. You want to walk in with cash and walk out with the best product. You want